Okay, so we are back to Mishlei 15:22. Hafer machashavos be'ein sod u'vrov yotim takum, which we translate as plans are thwarted without counsel or secret counsel. Okay, but with abundant advisors, they will be established. I want to actually just do the meiri, not the whole thing, but just he does a good job just presenting the different translations of sod. So and he joins this with the next week's pasuk. So he says, Sod ye'amer lifamim al lamas davar v'histarto. So sometimes sod is said about the concealment of matter and it's hiding. Sod Hashem li'reav im gala sodo v'sod acher al tagel. Right, so secret. Upa'am ye'amer al kibutz anashim lehisiyayitz eta beinehem. Sometimes it is said about a gathering of people to take counsel among themselves. Hein latov, hein lara, whether for good or for bad. Al amcha yarimu sod. Uvesod yisharim ve'eda, ve'al sod bachurim yachdav. V'hinehu amor b'inyan etza. Okay, fine. So we'll do the rest of the meiri later. I just want to read that to get the translation here. Okay, so our questions were, what is the decision-making scenario here? What type of machshavos is this referring to? What's the denotation and connotation of machshava? So I said it's plan. Moshe Koppel just mentioned that they're in machshavos am ki barahu, Rahi, something like that. Yeah. That in Kisisa it says machshava implies like what they're planning to do, right? What does hafer mean? How and in what sense are the machshavos thwarted without a sod? What exactly does be'ein sod mean? Why is it expressed in the negative instead of the positive? Meaning, why couldn't it have been said in public or when publicized? Can you translate be'ein sod as non-counsel? No, but good question. Doesn't increasing the number of yotim run the risk of revealing the sod? How do rov yotim result in establishing the machshava in the first half? What about bad advice? In what sense are they established in the second half? 9, what about the middleman? What if you have sod but not rov yotzim? 10, who's the audience? Is this for a specific kind of advice seeker or planner? And is this true? And if and to what extent? Yeah, Isaac.
Another question that we didn't ask is, what are yotzim and
right?
Why yotzim instead of like etza?
Right. What are yotzim? And then why frame it in terms of the people? Okay, so that's yotzim instead of the advice itself. Yeah, etza. Yeah, Ezra.
I have another translation question.
Yeah.
In Esther I saw, and then actually he says that as well.
Yeah.
It says yisad as like ordained, like the king ordained whatever. Is it yisad? Do you know if like the form of that for like ordainment would be sod or something similar?
Didn't we see someone yesterday who said that sod comes from yesod? Like there was some theory like that.
Oh
Yeah, right. Was it Sadiq? I have him up here. Yeah. Mitzvah Sion. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, that's strange. Can you the binyan? Let me actually check out did we look at, I don't think we looked at the Rishonim. Milim Kadmonim. So I always forget which Menachem this is. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, because there's a Menachem grammar. What was it? That's what I think also, but I always forget if that's the one that Rashi was quoting. Let's see here. Menachem ibn Saruk, Rashi in the second half of verse. Yeah, I guess it's the same one. Yeah, so I assume this is it. How many Menachems could there be who wrote grammar books that were popular among Rashi's time? So interesting. So Echad Yesod HaMizbeach, and then Hasheni Sod Hashem Le'Rev. So he does seem to say that they are related. Sod Hashem Le'Rev, Acher Yishavi B'Sod. Yeah, fine. Yeah, so I guess that's a pretty standard thing. Yeah, I guess you'd have to look and see that lashon in that context, like how related they say it is.
And then the second question would be like, would it be too far afield to give it like an approach based on that, or would you suggest?
It seems like it's certainly according to Stian, you got the matir, right? Yeah. It might also be like a poetic usage of sod because the second half is takum. It'll be established.
Yeah.
So firmly established, and sod is like a play on words, you know? Okay, so I want to review the ideas. I actually deliberately don't want to review Isaac's idea until later on because Isaac's was the non-traditional reading. We had, let's see, whose idea was the closest to Pshat? I think Moshe, 3 levels. Okay, if you don't take any advice, the plan will be thwarted. Okay, 2, if you take counsel to get a perspective outside of yourself to weed out obvious things that might thwart the plan, then that's a better thing, right? Meaning just getting any outside perspective. And then the highest level is getting lots of advice, which will not only point out major flaws, but you'll be able to like factor in lots of people. So in other words, it's interesting. So there's a qualitative leap from no advice to even one like external mind. And then there is a quantitative, I mean, there's potential for qualitative also, but there's quantitative difference going up. But I think the mistake here is going from 0 to 1 is not quantitative. That's qualitative because you're getting another perspective, not just like, data points or like, individual input. I also want to say what I think is the pshat of this. I was thinking more about Ibn Kasbi's methodological point about how the statements in Mishlei are made in an unqualified way, even if it means like a high probability. So if I ask you why is Mishlei stated that way, like why would he state it in absolute terms if it's not really absolute? What would you say?
Could be one reason, just like if you isolate the factors, then it's absolute.
Okay, that could be. So yeah, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, like if you kind of give like these like vague wishy-washy phrases, it doesn't really stick with much.
Okay, right. So I was going to say that. So the answer I've said up until now is that's the style of proverbs, right? Yeah. Like when you're giving a proverb, you're making it absolute, and if you say sometimes or in certain cases, it just dilutes the entire thing. Yeah, Isaac.
Also, it's supposed to be the design for you to be thinking about it, and not just applying it blindly.
Right, that's true. Right. Although
you like my idea.
you could argue though that stating it in an absolute way would discourage thinking about it and promote applying it blindly, right? Because you're stating it as a rule, So I was thinking that. Here's my pshat, and this is like a simple pshat, okay? But so I'm not learning sod as secret counsel, just counsel, okay? So plans are thwarted without counsel, but in an abundance of advisors, then it will be established. And I'm going with, I think Moshe Rosenthal has the cleanest pshat, but I want to say the reason why it's stated in an absolute manner, not just here, but in Mishlei in general, is that if you emotionally relate to it as an absolute, you'll implement it more. Okay. In other words, if you think, let's say you are planning something, or you have a certain decision that you're making, and you don't talk it over with anyone, if you think to yourself, my plan will fail if I don't consult someone, so even though that's not true, emotionally, if you just train yourself into thinking that way, it's going to prompt you to actually take counsel. Like you should equate it in your mind it's as if this is destined to fail if I don't ask anyone about it. That's a good way to jolt yourself into action. And you can all think about your own individual cases, but I think we all have cases where you have a decision to make, and or you're already on a course of action, and you got that nagging voice that says maybe I should ask someone about it. You're like, nah, So I think having an emotional counterweight of no, you are going to fail if you don't ask someone. I think that's a good impetus. Yeah.
May I ask a general question?
Sure.
Based upon that?
Yeah.
Something I thought about before is it okay to convince yourself of falsehoods because you think it'll lead to good conclusions like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer is I'm going to say this in an unqualified way. Yes, but I know, I think the answer is yes, because I think that is how the emotions work. That the emotions, Rambam always says the emotions don't make distinctions in terms of degree or quantity. The emotions need imagery or particulars, like particulars rooted in the imagination in order to be kicked into action. So I think that's just how you have to like talk to the emotions. And this is going to sound like I'm going like to a really extreme case here, but I mean, what's the greatest example of saying things that are not false in order to motivate the emotions is anthropomorphizing God. Right? Like we speak of Yad Hashem and Eini Hashem and, all these like gross physical attributes, knowing that it's not true, but emotionally we need that in order to operate properly, So I think, yes, obviously you could take this to the extreme and, and I think it's also, any lying, let me put it this way. I don't think it's lying to yourself if you do know what the truth is, meaning like attempt, like at a certain point we call it denial. I don't think that's what you're asking about. You're saying like and the example I give also is if you are I must have heard this somewhere because I have this specific example in mind. If you're running through a jungle being chased by a wild animal, and you see ahead a chasm, and you're thinking like, well, the only way to escape this animal is if I try jumping. And like let's say I have like a 60% chance I'll get over this. You should lie to yourself, I'm going to make it, because lying to yourself in that case could actually make you succeed. Whereas if you have any hesitation, it could like hold you back. And so there, I think it's like a different, I think that category of like the lying to yourself or the distortion actually changes the action you're capable of doing, of like going all in on that. And I think that's like, I think that's like its own category, Okay. Yeah, Joshua.
Just a thought on that. Like, could it be kind of like how when Rambam's like, you have to, to get to the middle of an emotion, right?
Yeah.
The middle of a quality, you have to sometimes overcompensate in
Right.
order to get back to the middle.
Right.
There's be a scenario like that where it's like in your mind you're on one side and you're like, in order to actually achieve a true middle, you have to almost lie to yourself that I want.
That's a good question.
For the other side in order to get to the middle.
That is a good question. So I once heard, I think the first explanation I heard of the Rambam. Okay, let me just comment on the Rambam's path for a second. With the Hilchos Deos, right? Is you got the two extremes, and then the middle path is what you should aim for / slightly to one side or the other. So I think the first explanation I ever heard of that, because it's very different than Mishlei, seemingly, right? Like Mishlei is you change behavior based on going over the intelligent and foolish decisions, and then integrating that into your personality, not forcing yourself behaviorally. Like Mishlei is more of a cognitive behavior approach, and Rambam seems very behaviorist, So the first explanation I heard of it that was like, oh, maybe this is more cognitive behavior than I think, was given by Rabbi Weiss, by Ellie's dad. And he said that if you have an extreme emotion, you have an extreme dea, so there is a feeling that there's like usually two kinds of feelings in different degrees. One is, this is who I am. I'm just a lazy person. I am just a like I don't know, like a powerful person, whatever you want to say it is. So that's one thing. And then the other is a catastrophizing of what would happen if I did the opposite. So you build up. You think there's no way. Like, let's say you are a stingy person, right? So you catastrophize and say, well, if I spend lavishly without thinking about it, I'm just going to go bankrupt. Like you just like blow it out of proportion. So what Rabbi Weiss explained is if you behaviorally force yourself to do the opposite, then emotionally it breaks the self-image, and emotionally it breaks the catastrophizing and allows you to then find the middle, which my understanding of the middle path is not that you want the middle dea, but it's that you have complete emotional fluidity, that you can do whatever is necessary, whatever your mind tells you is right, and you're not bound by either side. So I think in that sense, then again, I don't know if I want to call it lying to yourself, but exaggerating the side that the extreme that you're striving for can help you break out of the opposite form of exaggeration. They're both, in other words, if your baseline is truth, then distorting truth could be bad. But if your baseline is distortion, you might need a counterforce distortion to break you out of it so that you can find the middle truth. That's a good question. Yeah.
So first off, I think that Rabbi Weiss's explanation works really well with the Lashon of the Rambam, which is where he says if you love a bad day, that you need to go to the opposite extreme.
That's for the illnesses of the soul. That's not for the normal mitzvah, if I'm correct.
Yeah, for the normal mitzvah, he says you just behave in the proper in the middle.
Right.
But you're talking about where you are
curing it, right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, right.
So the other thing I was gonna say is maybe that was another reason why psukim are in absolutes and not don't have a nuance. It's because as soon as there's an exception, people will say, "Oh, I'm the exception."
Right.
The case of the exception.
Yeah. Correct. Right. Yeah, that is a good reason. Yeah. It's it's good book, Mishlei. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I say that, but what I mean by that is it really is not. I mean, I've said this a lot, but like it's not just about the ideas. It's about how he delivers the ideas to you. That is a really, really good. There's a lot of chachma in that also. Yeah. Should I bring this up? I had an interesting. I'll bring this up because we're talking Mishlei methodology. I had an interesting. For once, I got a YouTube comment that was not spam. So this person gave an explanation on the pasuk we did last week, okay, which was just a second here. Just getting this. I don't know. I just don't want to bring it up on the screen. Is it? Yeah. So nefesh amel amlolo the ki akav alav pihu, right? So we didn't even know how to translate that so much. So I'm just gonna read. This is not the part that I'm getting at, but I just want to read it for like thoroughness purposes. He says the phrase nefesh amel should be understood as the toiler's soul, not the toiling soul. This is because amel is a masculine noun meaning laborer or worker, not an adjective. Grammatically, this is a construct phrase meaning that the soul, nefesh, belongs to the man who labors. It is his inner being, appetite, or life force. The verb amla, meaning she toils or it labors, is a feminine singular and agrees with nefesh, which is also feminine. I don't know if it's always feminine. I think that's one that could be both. Thus, the subject of the verb is the toiler's soul. And what the verse is saying is that the toiler's soul toils for him. That is, his own inner drive or appetite is what makes him work hard for his survival. The pronoun lo means for him, making it clear that this internal labor is on behalf of the toiler. He works to satisfy his own needs. The second half of the verse explains the reason for this inner toil, ki akaf alav pihu, because his mouth has forced it upon him. The verb akaf means to force or to compel. The phrase upon him, alav, and his mouth, pihu, refer back to the toiler, not the soul. In other words, his own hunger compels him to work. With that said, the exact sense of nefesh here can be debated. It may mean soul in the broad sense of inner being or life force, but it could also mean appetite, desire, or even gullet, especially in light of the mouth in the second half of the verse. At the very least, this broader range of meaning should be kept in mind when reading the verse. Thus, the overall picture is of a person whose own needs, especially the need to eat, drive him to labor. In simple terms, the meaning of the verse is a laborer's appetite works hard for him because his hunger forces him to, or to put it in modern phrasing, a man's got to eat, that's why he works. Okay, so I thought that was like a very, very nice YouTube comment. Okay, so then I asked him, so I thanked him for it. I said, thanks for all of the grammar and stuff like this. And so I said, okay, so my only main question is, what's the chiddush? Okay, so then this is the comment that's methodology-wise. He says, this is where we part ways methodologically. I take Proverbs at face value and avoid reading anything into it that isn't there. I don't assume these sayings were written by the wisest man who ever lived, nor do I approach them with any dogma. I take each proverb or unit of Proverbs on its own terms without imposing outside ideas. So to answer your question in short, no, I don't, and I don't think there is one. Okay, so I was like, very interesting, to take that approach. And I obviously disagree with him, but I don't fault him for, like, that's basically saying that, like, Mishlei is like any other proverb that you would have in any other collection of ancient wisdom, and like don't think too deeply into it. And Ezra.
And what's the point of learning it? Like reading it, fine.
Oh, I don't know if he would say that there's a point to learning it. I mean, I might ask him that.
He's watching shiur about it.
What was that?
He's watching shiur.
I wanted to call him out on that also. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, what I also wanted to ask him is well, there's a proverb that says, Laseis lefasayim orma lenar dasum zima yishma chacham yosef lekach v'tachbulas navon yikneh, which is that the four audiences of Mishlei are the simpleton will hear and become to give cunning to the simpletons, to give to the youth knowledge and design. The Chacham will hear and increase his learning, and the Navon will acquire strategies. So I always use this as an argument for there are at least 4 audiences to Mishlei, and the type of idea he's saying, I agree, for the Nar and for the Pesi, taking it at face value is a huge leap up. And maybe even for the Chacham, it could be a simple idea, but you're really going to tell me that the Navon, according to how Mishlei defines Navon, is not going to have deeper insights and strategies that he gets from this? Yeah, Moshe?
It's also, regardless of even if you believe that it's the greatest, wisest man
Yeah.
ever lived, you can still try to interpret what he's saying as infallible for the sake of argument,
Right.
try to glean ideas, and then if there's nothing you can come up with, then you can reject
Right,
it
exactly.
and say it's like
Yeah.
so. But even if you're reading, like, let's say a Chinese proverb,
Yeah.
quote unquote,
Yeah.
some generic anything, you would assume that there's wisdom behind it when you're trying to do an analysis of it.
Right.
And then if you can't come up with anything, then maybe you'll reject it.
Right. Yeah, I think though that there, again, this is like, I think that there is a legitimate methodological, I don't want to call it machlokes, but like stance that you take when reading anything, which is, how much do you assume about the author and how much do you just interpret the surface value of the words, but again, so I think, yeah, I mean, I see where he's coming. So in other words, even in your case here, that's the thing. Like if someone made a comment, just his second comment, I'd be like, oh, you're clearly an idiot, right? He did treat the verse seriously, right? But he's just not going the extra step of assuming that there's something more profound than what he came up with, which is, I think, again, it's like basic analysis is like you have to take into account the words, the speaker, and the and the context, and and he's just, I think, not really giving one its due. Yeah.
Just for the sake of developing the point, I think about the 4 audiences, he could just say, oh, they're all going to learn these ideas and learn how to, how to interact better with people, and and they're just going to benefit from that.
Right.
It's just because different people.
Right. Yeah. He could also say that not every pasuk is for all 4 of those people. Like you could say a lot of answers, right? Yeah. But I do think that, and this is the thing that Moshe Mizels always quotes to me from Rabbi Moskowitz is an interesting thing. Like if I could talk to Rabbi Moskowitz again, then I would bring this up like every couple of years, which is he said he was learning with Mishlei with Rabbi Moskowitz once, and then someone asked, like, Rabbi Moskowitz, how do we know that the ideas we're coming up with are really the ideas that Shlomo meant? And Rabbi Moskowitz said something like, I don't know, but they're good ideas, And I do think that there is I totally acknowledge that we may be reading things into Mishlei or coming up with ideas that Shlomo didn't come up with, but I think that's by design. Like, I think that is in the same way as the derech of Chazal is midrashim and agada, that some of them they're trying to interpret what the Devar Hashem is or what the Pasukim say, but sometimes most of the time they're clearly like just utilizing the text as material as a springboard for other examinations and ideas, and that's a legitimate derech of learning in our Masorah, like going all the way back. Someone argue even more than the Pshat analysis, like older than the Pshat analysis. I think this is a totally legitimate way to learn Mishlei. Yeah.
I would just say about the commenter, I think it's kind of the pitfall that the Rambam has the 3 groups of people about
I was thinking the same thing.
Where he's saying what my understanding of this is all that there is to it.
Right.
And I think even if you say he's not the wisest man who ever lived, you still have that with if let's say you're learning Chinese proverb,
right,
and you read it and you're like, oh, well, that's obvious, and then you just move on, and you don't think that maybe there's something that you missed, even though the wording's a little weird, and it seems to be indicating maybe there's something more. Right.
Does he say this in the first group or the second group?
It's the second group.
Second group, yeah.
Right.
I thought it was the first group.
The first group of people who just believe it.
No, I know, but I thought he says that they think that there's no there's.
Well, it's actually both the first group and the second group.
I know that is the mistake they're making, but does he even say this outright, or are we? He says they think. What was that?
Yeah. let's leave this top paragraph here.
Top paragraph. First group includes the majority of people I've met and whose books I've seen and about whom I've heard. These people understand the words of Chazal according to the literal meanings without explaining them at all. To them, all impossible things are believed to be necessary. This is due to the stupidities and matters of science and their inexperience without the branches of knowledge. They lack sufficient perfection to be awakened to such wisdom on their own, and they have found no one to awaken them. Oh yeah. Consequently, they think that the only meaning in the wise words of Chazal is what they themselves understand, namely the literal meaning, right? Meaning that they can't envision someone who has a higher chachma than them, such that they would even be prompted to say, maybe there's something deeper here than I get when I just examine this on the surface, right? Yeah, it is similar to that, right? And the first two groups make this mistake, but the first group exalts Chazal for this, and the second group degrades Chazal for this, but they're both limiting it based on their own mind, right? Okay, that was a tangent, but an important one. Okay, yeah, Joshua?
Sorry, just a
Yeah.
practical question on
Yeah.
this. What is what kinds of decisions are we supposed to be seeking counsel for? Or just is it everything? And how do we know when it's too many advisors or enough advisors?
Yeah. So according to what I'm calling the pshat, which is Moshe Rosenthal and my interpretation here, so then I think this would apply to, truthfully, it would apply to any thought you have, even if it's not a practical plan. Right. It's just, I think the pasuk is talking about practical plans, because I don't think you would use the word yoatzim if you're talking about just theoretical ideas. But I think this is for all practical planning, all in the unqualified sense, maybe not all, but it is, you can say the more the merrier, but there's obviously a point of diminishing returns. Like you're not going to ask every single human on earth. Right. And the question of how, who do you ask? How many people do you ask? I think there's a general thing of the more people you ask, the better. But then there's only a limited number of things that you can weigh in. And you have to pull the trigger at some point, But according to what I'm saying, I think it's all advice, right? Yeah. Okay. So then continuing review. All right. So Ezra Koppel said you need a secret counsel, because if the group is too big, then someone will thwart the plan. The solution is to have many individual counselors, each of whom knows part, so you can keep the secret, right? Okay, so that I think that's a good idea. So Sean had something to add, but first of all, he said this is talking about Machshavah for radical change. If you don't do it discreetly, meaning if you do it be'ein sod, without a secret counsel, okay, meaning for some reason the double negative.
I'm talking about in terms of action.
Yeah.
You need to, if you introduce this to the wrong people,
right,
or you don't do it in a way, or if you do it too publicly that it's going to get out, and the people who are adversaries of this thing are going to come and try and knock you down. Ultimately, you're going to create enemies, and whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Right. Yeah. So then you'll face opposition because you'll butt up against the wrong people, especially because people don't like being blindsided by radical plans, even if they're good. Otherwise, they just don't like the out of nowhere secretive nature of this. And also there could be ego dynamics that play in when they see that you were going behind their back, or they perceive that you're going behind their back. If you get an abundance of input and support from people, then you'll have the real support. The pasuk isn't about the quality of the plan per se, but it's about how to bring the plan to fruition without facing opposition. I had a phrase that came to mind when I was reviewing this idea on the way here. I don't know how much this might lead to another interpretation, but and computer science people can weigh in on this, which is that everyone? No, because I was listening to a podcast about Meta versus OpenAI, and open source versus you call it close, what's the opposite term?
Not
open source. Okay, fine. Yeah, right. So obviously if you make it, there's many reasons to make it not open source, right? But then there's also the risk, once you have any sort of secrets, then there is the risk of stealing secrets, divulging secrets, getting behind closed doors, betrayal. One of the benefits of open source is you're not hiding anything, so everything is out in the open, and no one can accuse you of trying to manipulate what you're doing in ways that are secret plotty or all that other stuff. And so it's not exactly corresponding to Sean's idea, but I like the language of open source in relation to when you're trying to make radical change, of being completely open about it. And I think it also casts the person trying to make the change in not positive light, but in a you can't blame the person like I don't have anything to hide. I've made all my plans open from the very beginning, So I think that's like a benefit. You got another idea?
Yeah, so it was
Or
also
a-
just on
yeah.
focusing on as like radical change in Sod.
Yeah.
That I think there's also this emotional quality to it, that the person sometimes gets intimidated by the radical change and they're
Yeah.
afraid that people aren't gonna accept it, there's self-doubt. And so if you allow that to control you, then you won't go out to these people, and then the plan won't come to fruition either,
Yeah.
because you haven't engaged with the proper people to make the
Right.
plan successful.
It's interesting how that can lead to, that could be like a self-fulfilling prophecy also and it can take two forms, either conscious doubt and fear of what people are going to say, or convincing yourself that people are automatically going to support you. But either way, it's unsubstantiated until you actually talk to people. There are plenty of people who make radical change that they're very afraid to take that first step. And then when they do, they realize there is an upwelling of support. And if they had known that, then they might have like engaged it differently. And then there's people who think that they're going to get the upwelling of support and it's totally like shot down. And so like the only way to know is to like have Rov Yoatzim. Yeah. Isaac?
I think I don't understand the facts of this idea. Ein Sod sounds like you're not doing it discreetly, and Rov Yoatzim is also not discreet because you have Rov Yoatzim.
Is that what's confusing me also? Because something is like not jiving in my reading of the first half. So plans are thwarted
Without secrecy, meaning I'm not tying in counsel to the first half.
But you're saying your plans are thwarted. I thought you were saying plans are thwarted with secrecy. Is that the
No.
but then that's so not.
Well, there's this tension, and then the second idea that I just shared.
Yeah.
There's a tension between you need to do it discreetly.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do it discreetly, you're gonna introduce it to the wrong people. But there's also that if you take that too far, that fear is going to control you, and you won't introduce it to the right people, and then it won't succeed either. So you need to find that middle ground.
Right. So just do me a favor, just read the pasuk one more time.
Without introducing radical change discreetly.
Without introducing radical change discreetly, yeah.
You will fail because it's going to be introduced to the wrong people. However, if you don't have enough people, meaning you haven't introduced it to the right people, then it ultimately will be unsuccessful. So the way in which for it to be successful, is the second.
Yeah, I get the idea. I think there's still something in the first half that is I feel like it reads the opposite. Is that what's bothering you, or something else is bothering you?
It's different from what you were saying.
Okay.
I think what you were saying doesn't match with the pasuk.
Okay.
Because about the open source, because it's saying with Ein Sod, like we were saying,
right,
everything that's open,
right,
then it will
right, yeah.
I think what he's saying is,
hold on a second. But would it work if you said without counsel, meaning if you do it secretly, meaning not secret counsel? The Ein Sod, meaning if you just keep all the plans to yourself, then your plans will be thwarted for the reasons that Sean was saying, for plans for radical change.
Yeah,
right.
Being secret.
Yeah, right. But in others, I think the confusion on my part is we're not reading the word secret as sod. It's without counsel, meaning if you keep all these plans to yourself, then I think that's a smoother read, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay.
I just want to take
I still think it fits with secret, but I do hear.
Okay. Yeah. I just want
that there are elements of secret that are related to counsel and elements of counsel that are related to secret.
Yeah. So plans are thwarted without counsel, i.e., if you try to keep your plans for radical change secret, then you will fail. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I was hearing it. I thought it was the explanation that was going to go in a different way, which is that with any plan, there's going to be some people who are going to be in favor, and some people who are going to be against it. And so, if you are just completely out in the open, then you know, and it's a practical thing. The people who are against it are going to shoot it down before it can get any traction. And so the thing that you need to do is, you know, find the people who you know are going to be supportive, and you know, sell them on the idea so that when you make it a public idea, they'll be behind you and supporting it.
Yeah, I'm reading
Okay.
more like
Yeah,
that.
so then that's a different idea.
Yeah.
Because it's about how
how
many people you reveal it to.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
That's
about
interesting.
secret.
Yeah.
You know, if you do it
Yeah.
completely without secret,
Right.
then
Right.
then it's
I
gonna,
mean, that's
you know,
closer to Ezra's reading of revealing it to the select select people, right? Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, all right. Continuing the review, Isaac's idea is that this is expressing the foolish Havamina, namely, if I have no advice, that's bad, but if I have a lot of advice, it will definitely succeed. So Kamash Malan, advice is only good if it's good, and it's not like you just want the stamp of approval of I ask people. You know, and then you can be yote. You know, it's not like advice is about yote. Yeah, this is why it's rov yoatzim, not rov etza, because he thinks that the consultation of people will make his plan succeed. And that's also the emphasis on rov, is majority does not equal correctness. You can have a bunch of people who say that that you should do this, but it's the person with good advice that is going to determine things. Okay, yeah.
I have a method about actually all the other ideas.
Okay.
So a thing that I'm realizing that is a thing that I'm objecting to them, but
yeah,
I feel like it'll be good to talk about because a lot of things necessarily true. I feel like the way that I am inclined to read psukim, is as something that it's kind of like it's specific in a certain way, but it really applies to more broad decision making as opposed to a very specific decision making scenario. And I think all like the other ideas about specifically a decision where you need secret counsel, and it seems very specific in a way that I think I'm.
That's also right. That's also why I gave my interpretation. I don't think it's about secrets.
Yeah,
I think it's about asking advice. I think that fits your criterion.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if that's a valid objection.
It's not a valid objection, but it is a valid default stance, meaning that because we do know that there are psukim. We know this from Sadigon saying there's yesh psukim, and then we also know just from the way the meforshim take psukim that they do sometimes say it's about specific decision making scenarios. And you often get it from the context of the psukim. That you might read a pasuk in isolation as being universal, but then if you read it as part of a cluster, then you realize, oh, we're talking about rebuking your son, or we're talking about like lazy, So I think definitely in Mishlei, there are lots of psukim that are about specific scenarios, but I think as a default, assuming that it's about as general as possible is a fine default.
Yeah, but I'd say even though it's about rebuking your son, it's that's like, I'd say like the paradigm case, but then it applies to more broadly to how you handle rebuke from a position of authority. In most for most of the ones.
Oh, so that's okay. So the ideas I think always have to be as universal as possible, but the case from which the ideas emerge, I think, can be specific.
Okay, yeah. So
like for example, like let's take psukim about leitim. The specific thing that scoffers do. We learn a lot about aggression and ego from those, so the ideas are universal, but it is about like how a lates takes to, like I think there's lots of psukim that are about specific scenarios.
Okay, yeah. So I'd say for the other ideas that we were talking about, let's say like secret counsel. I think, I can see how they are true in like the more specific case of, where you need secret counsel or you need to not do secret or whatever, but. It seems to me to be localized to that. I'm not seeing how that would be more like it's an sort of like broader.
Okay, I hear. Okay, okay, we're not going to review David's in the interest of time because he's not here. Ariel's now we said we were going to come back to. Sometimes you need a secret counsel, a select group that you consult in order to figure out viable plans to maximize efficiency in the decision-making process. Similarly, you sometimes need a lot of feedback for the sake of thorough vetting because you never know where a good idea will come from. And the question is, when does each apply? If we can get clarity in that, meaning that that the first idea is similar to whose idea we were saying here about the like about you don't just ask everyone for stuff. You want people who are specialized in the area or have like special insight. But what was it?
Ezra.
Okay, yeah, right. And then but the other thing is that sometimes just getting feedback, even from like Ameharites in the area, can point out stuff that like that the experts don't see. I mean, the classic example of this is like, if you've ever used any website or program that has a horrible user interface, you're like, why did they not test this with real people? Like you definitely like get the impression that like there's a bunch of like people who are like, yeah, it's gonna work if you do it like this, but then it's so divorced from like how actual people would use it that like just ask the normal people, like or movies also. Like again, like when you see like a movie that is millions of dollars and it tanks in the box office, like what happened? Clearly people were too caught up in their own head, yeah. So can we answer? I don't think that we need like a specific like answer, like litmus test answer, but just any insight into. It's interesting because Ariel is also reading it as an and. I modified our translation to say but like and I think fits in better with Ariel's.
Just have a shot for Ariel. So the first way where you don't want a ton of advice is that, like, how's the pasuk reading?
Plans are thwarted without a specific council, elite council, let's say.
I see.
Yeah, meaning that you're going to need an elite council to, I guess it kind of addresses both sides. Meaning if you do it without an elite council, then that's going to be bad. But if you do it with a council that's not elite, that's also bad. Many yoatim, a multitude of yoatim will make it.
Right.
So it's two frameworks of advice seeking. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe we can relate this somewhat to your idea.
Yeah.
Which is that people, when they have plans, don't care about advice.
Yeah.
And so there's not only is there resistance to getting advice, but there's a resistance to thinking about what type of advice I need. And so the pasuk is forcing you to realize that there are, not only do you need advice, but you need the right kind of advice, and you need to be particular about thinking what is going to be the best advice to get and who's it going to be coming from. Okay, that's good. Yeah. All right. So I'm just gonna just for my own notes here say you need that's the point, is you need both categories. You need to consider both categories in every situation, because there's a different type of chachma in specialized knowledge and in like common sense, slash how people are going to react, how non-experts are going to react, how common people are going to react. Yeah. Okay. I think that's good. Okay. In the minute remaining, no, quick question. Next week is Yosef's wedding. I know a lot of guys are going to that, which I assume, and that's on a Tuesday, right? Tuesday. Yeah. So I assume that means that Wednesday, we're not going to have the usual. How many of you are going? Okay. Right. So like about half. Yeah. So maybe what we'll do is do meforshim on this on Wednesday. That way people who miss are not missing anything, like a new pasuk. And then maybe we'll do something else on Thursday or something like that. But because I do want to do meforshim. Yeah. What was it?
Q&A?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we haven't done a Q&A in a while. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. All right. So let's do that then. I don't want to like try to rush any meforshim here. All right. I'm glad we did the thorough review though. I think we refined a lot of the ideas, and I think it was a lot of good methodology about Mishlei. So yeah. All right. Nice.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.